biz. This is the biz.
Welcome back to another episode of Diving Deep with the Levs. We are excited because we have something special for you today. We are ending our success series, and we thought what better way than to invite a couple who we look up to and admire, who has a healthy, happy, thriving marriage, to share some of their success clues
and they
with
still
us.
like each other too.
Yes, they do.
That's
they
important
do.
to state.
And you can tell, and I'm sure you're gonna be excited for what you get your pen and your paper ready, because we're excited for the nuggets and the gems that are gonna be dropped. We have known this couple for 20 years, me personally, maybe a little bit less for you, honey, but I've always admired them. And when we thought, who is a healthy couple that we can invite onto the show, because you don't see a lot of that nowadays, and we had to actually put some thought into it, and they were the first ones that came to mind. We've always admired that they are healthy, they have longevity in their marriage, and they're up to some good things. So I call them Pastor Clarence and Pastor Rose, and we want to welcome you to our show today.
Well, thank you for inviting us.
Yes. Thank you for being here. We're so excited. So excited. So tell us, how long have you guys been married, for the listeners, the viewers?
Long time. So he'll say 40 years.
Going on 40.
He'll
Really?
say 40, but it's not actually 40. So
Okay.
it's been like more like 36, and then we've been together for the other 4. So we just count it all.
Okay, you
Right.
just
Feels
round
like,
up.
Feels
Okay.
like
Round
40.
up.
40
Feels
years.
like 40.
You said it
I've
feels
been with
like
your girl for 40.
40, shouty.
Okay, and so how did you guys meet? Now I haven't heard this story,
You
so I'm
haven't
Oh my
excited.
God. You want to tell the story, or should I?
You always
I
add
think
a little
I
extra
think we
to it.
need both
I
perspectives.
know there's
Yeah,
always
yeah,
two.
we gonna
There's
get
always
that.
two sides.
Because I came to LA to stay with my aunt to go to design school. And so he was in the military, and his mother lived across the street. So when I get there to LA, he comes over and he's like, "Oh, hello." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, hi." You know, it's just like, and then so he calls me and he says, "Oh, but I just want to invite you to Compton." And I'm like, who invites somebody to Compton? This guy's like weird.
That's where I'm from.
Right. I'm like, this guy's like weird. So then a couple days later, my aunt and I are sitting in her kitchen. And so someone knocks on the back door, and he sticks his head through the door, because she's like, "Come in." He sticks his head through the door. "Hi." And I'm like, "Well, who is this cat?" This is just weird. I'm like, "Who is it?" They're sticking his head halfway in the door. It's like, "Well, why don't you come inside?" He's not coming inside. And I'm like, okay, this is like really weird. He's already called me.
Right.
And now he's just sticking his head in the door. So anyway, he invited me. It was maybe a couple of weeks later. And he was like, "Oh, I'm coming over to invite you for lunch." And I'm like, "I don't even know you."
Wow.
And he's like, "Oh, well, I'm going to give you 10 minutes. And I'm like, "I can't get dressed in 10 minutes. Okay, well, I'll give you 5. And he just walked off the porch.
Oh, that was your
That's good
game
stuff.
back
That's
then.
good
Big
stuff.
dog.
Yeah,
He's
you
like,
don't-
that part's
yeah.
accurate. That's
You don't even
accurate.
see that no more. That's
And I
classic.
was like,
Yeah.
"Oh my God, you got to be kidding me."
You couldn't
I
say
run
no.
in-
How do you say no to that?
Yeah,
I run back into the house, and it's like my auntie had kept girls at that time. So she's like, "You got to get dressed. You got to get dressed." And so I'm getting dressed and everything, and I'm trying to get dressed in 5 minutes. 'Cause
Wow.
it's like 5 minutes. And I'm like, "Okay, I'm ready." And that was the end of the story.
And then you guys been dating ever since?
Ever since.
Yeah,
What?
damn, ever since. Yeah.
I'm
Took her
surprised
out
you
to-
went. Like, just knowing who you are, I would be like, I'm not going nowhere with you. Like,
Yeah.
I'm surprised. You were like,
Oh
okay.
my gosh. But you know what? It was so funny, because it's like 5 minutes and everybody in the house was laughing. I mean, because it was all girls. Everybody in there was just cracking up. "I can't believe he said 5
Yes.
minutes. Girl, you better be ready in 5 minutes." So I'm like, okay, I got to get ready in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And so it was like a good old, what did you take me?
Good old earth.
The good old earth. Sprout sandwiches.
Oh, okay.
About that huge.
Ooh.
And he thought that I was going to sit there and be like cute. And I was like, I just ate the whole thing. He's like, "Oh my God. Can't believe you eat like
Walked
that."
it like a rib. But you know, that was my first indication that I said, well, this is the woman. This is the one. You know how some people say, well, when you meet people, and how do you know this is the
Yes.
one?
That's
She
the
worked
question.
that salad like it was salad. I said, oh, yeah.
She can eat. That's the
yeah,
one.
she can eat, and she can cook.
Yes. Yes.
Because she was putting it down.
Oh, that's funny.
That's
And,
going down in history. For the
yeah.
one, how did you know she was the one? The way that she ate.
The way she ate.
But you know,
and-
the other thing, not to cut you off, babe, but the other thing about him is because we sat there and all we did was laugh. All we did was just laugh and talk. And you know how that is. It's like you look at time and time doesn't exist.
Yeah.
You I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I sat there and I remember thinking to myself, and I told him this. I said, you know what? I sat there afterwards, not at that day. And I said, you know what? I said, as I was sitting there, I was like, you know what? I could spend the rest of my life with this man. I was like, oh my God. And I'm like, I don't even know who he is.
Wow.
But I could spend the rest of my life with him. And so when I told him that, he's like, girl.
You told him that later? Like
I
how
told
much?
him that right later. And he was
okay.
like, girl, yeah, right. I'm like, no, I really did. I was like
Wow.
sat there and I was like, oh my God, I could like spend the rest of my life with this guy.
Just enjoy
He was so
being in his
funny. He
presence.
was so humorous. He was like, always quick coming back with something after I'd say something. So yeah, and it's been like that ever since. Yeah,
Since.
he's still witty like that.
Yeah. I was going to say, how do you keep like after being married for so long, like your spouse still? And I know you said, I'm madly in love with her, like how do you keep that going? Because we see so many couples where that wears off over time. It kind of fades, they say like there's the honeymoon phase and then there's the reality and the growth, but some people just leave the honeymoon in the beginning and they don't ever circle back to that phase in their marriage. So how do you guys keep that? Like, I like you, I love you, I want to be with you. Like you said, you knew in that moment because he was witty. Is that what kind of keeps you guys just the friendship strong?
For me, it's seeing who he is. And he's always been who he is.
Yeah.
And I've always appreciated him for who he is. And that has never, ever changed. He wasn't one person in the beginning and then ended up being someone else.
That's good.
And so for me, it's always been seeing him, not seeing this, but seeing him and appreciating him for who he is. Because he's always been genuine. He's always been the same guy that I met at that table.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's not difficult. I don't always like him.
Okay,
Because there are
elaborate.
times, because there are some times when it's like life, you know what I'm saying, or you have things that are happening in life, and it's like his shortness may be something that it's like I want to have a conversation, but it might be short, and it might be something that's abrupt, and I don't like you right now. I don't, but we'll have a conversation about that.
Okay.
Why I don't like you, but he does the same thing with me. Babe, you're just a jerk. I don't.
Yeah.
but I think the comfortability and us telling the truth to each other.
Yeah.
It's like I don't like you right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why don't you like me? Well, I don't like you because. And it's like, okay, then we sit down and have a conversation about that. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, then I apologize because that's not cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I love you, but I don't, and it's like not liking you like I don't like you. It's like I'm really like I don't like what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or I don't like what you said. So in the moment, I don't really like you right now.
Yeah.
So we're going to time out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a good good way to phrase it, because people get to a point where in marriage they start to, because we don't like each other as much as we did, there's something wrong with our marriage. And so what I'm hearing you say is that having these conversations, these honest, open conversations, is an opportunity for you to repair and to rebuild that trust and that relationship. So when you think of like all that life has to offer, like with work, family, and your personal time in marriage, how do you find a balance within that?
I don't think we try to have one.
Really? Please tell me, because I'm like searching for how do I find the balance in this?
Right.
I don't think so, because it's like he and I were having a conversation. You want to?
No, go ahead.
Oh, he and I were having a conversation, and it's like, babe, we've always he's spontaneous. I'm a planner. You know what I mean?
We hear.
It's like, but him, it's like, no, come on, let's just go do this, or let's go. So it's never been like, let's sit down and let's try to figure out how do we do work, how do we do life, how do we do me, how do we do you, how do we kind of merge it all together?
Yeah.
We just be.
Wow.
And that's the only way that I can explain it. We don't try to sit down and try to figure out how we're going to do this. What are we going to do? I mean, like he can be at work and, babe, what are you doing right now? Oh, well, I'm working on some designs. Hey, well, stop what you're doing and let's go have lunch. And I'm like, okay, what time are we going to meet?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, that's kind of like been our life all of our life.
Okay.
It's just like, I guess you say just go with the flow.
Yeah. But that's
Just go
cool
with the
to
flow.
hear, especially because I'm a planner and I'm constantly like, especially when we got married, it was just us, but now we have 2 little ones, right? So then that brought a totally different dynamic. And it was like, how do I find this balance as a mother, as a wife? How do I keep it together, you know, and still make sure that this is the priority? Because becoming a mother, you can get lost in just becoming a mother alone. And so to hear you say like kind of just go with the flow, I'm not a go with the flow because I'm a planner. I need to know what's in the flow, where we going, where is it leading me, you know?
But it causes so much stress.
It does.
It's like you are so stressed out because you want to know when, what, how long, how come, how much money do we have? I mean, it's just, it's such a stressor instead of just saying, you know what, leave it all on the table. You want to go right now, let's do it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. That's good, being able to just go with the flow. I think that's something that I need to incorporate a little bit more.
I think it's a little more difficult with kids going with the flow, cause you know, but it's always been just me and her. So a lot of times when she's stressing, I'm looking for a cruise, you know, or a vacation trip. But I think to answer your question, the most effective part of our lives is communicating. You know, always making time to take time to talk. You know, and I think it's so important because it's almost like the way I put it is you got two major companies coming together. Both have their own ideology, philosophies of life. And so in order to make it work, there doesn't have to be a compromise, but there has to be a sacrifice. Compromise is something we can change and we can always go back and pick it up again. But sacrifice is when you decide that I'm going to let this go for the betterment of this, which is always a decision when you're in a relationship, you know, to go forward. And so we talk, sometimes we lay in the bed in the morning and talk for like 3 or 4 hours. Wow. Just talking about things, nothing, you know, and never really taken away from the other person. But always bringing something to give. See, because love gives. Lust takes. And when you love somebody, you always want to give them the best part of you. You know, you want to make sure that you take the time to say, hey, listen, even almost 40 years, I'm introducing myself to you. I'm letting you see a side of me that you've never seen. And as a believer, God always gives the creativity. He gives us the ability to see things that we would not normally see if we wasn't on our knees praying, if we wasn't fasting together, if we wasn't communicating. The basic fundamentals of truth is how we live our lives every day. You know, when I say I love you, she knows that I'm saying I love you from my heart. It's not just me saying I love you. And I believe that love is an action word. So it's not something that's just to be said, but it's something to be lived.
Right.
You know.
And so what I'm hearing you say is when you express that love, there's also this element of communication that helps you navigate, you know, just the different dynamics of life. And because you are communicating, you don't necessarily have to plan it in order for it all to work itself out and for it to balance. And so because you are effective communicators in your relationship, it sounds like you are able to spend 3 hours in the bed, or you're able to give that call while she's in the middle of work, which some people would probably get frustrated. But because you've learned how you both work and what works for you, you're able to use communication as a way to kind of navigate and avoid stress and all those other things in your relationship.
That's what I said. That's what I said.
One of the things that he mentioned, we mentioned this in a previous podcast, was like to stay curious about your spouse. And it sounds like you guys have that. Like, don't feel like, 40 years, you like, I know what you're going to say before you can say it. We're going to finish each other's sentences. And you feel like you don't leave room for growing, evolving over time. And so how have you guys kind of managed that in terms of the different phases of life?
Because there are different phases. You're not the same person that you were when you first got married. You're not the same person 2 years later.
Wait. You got to say that again. For the people listening. You got to say that again for the people in the back who ain't hear that one clear. You got to say that again.
You're not the same person. Excuse me. You're not the same person 2 years later. You're not the same person because there's different dynamics that happen. You're still, okay, let me slow down because there's so much going through my head right now. There's so many different things that happen to you as an individual person. that causes changes. The things that you thought were true sometimes are not true anymore because there's a reality that has happened in your life that brings another dimension of truth. And it's not that it wasn't true. It's just like you see something in a different perspective or a different light that that illuminates maybe what it is that you thought or believed previously.
Yeah.
So you're constantly maturing and you're constantly growing. You're not the same person, and you have to allow the other person that you're with to grow as well, because they're not. And if you're paying attention to what's happening in their life, they got things that are going on as well with whether it's work or whether it's with their mother, father, sister, brother, family. And, you know, that family dynamic, that's a whole nother thing that messes with you as a person, you know, that can come in and affect the marriage. But you guys got to make sure that, you know what, hey, the two of you keep that together. But still, there's different things that happen. There's, I mean, you know, the way that you go through sorrow, the way that you go through life. I mean, the not life, but the things that are in life.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's not life. Life is beautiful.
Yeah.
God gave us life beautiful. But it's the things that happen in life that changes a person over a course of time. So you're not the same person. And it's good to always, and what we do, it's like, babe, how are you doing? Honey, how are you doing? How are you doing now? How are you, where are you? How do you feel about this? How do you feel about this? How do you feel, you know, because, excuse me, with Clarence, he has children, right? So, and even though we call them our boys, they're still his children. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so even with the dynamic with what they're going through and issues that are in their life and the way that it affects him, then it affects our marriage to some degree, because he's not the same person because of what's happening at that particular time. You have to give people space to go through life, even though you're married.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that whole like control stuff, no. Sometimes you just got to back it up and let them be who they are, go through what it is that they need to go through, and you just be that support system. So that's the part of the learning curve.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you then. Like, when he's going through those elements of what's happening with him and his biological children, how do you get to a place to where you are, I guess, not as impacted by that enough to say that I'm going to give you space to work that out, and rather than being someone who's controlling over that situation?
Because to be able to see him and to be able to say, that's not my issue, which it really isn't. He's my issue.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But the immediate issue comes with how he's handling and how he's dealing stuff. And you have to give a person the space to back up to let them figure out what they need to do. You can't figure it out for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But to love them enough to say, hey, you know what? This is something that you're going through. I'm here for you if you need me, if you need to talk to me, if there's something that you need to say, whatever it is, I'm still here for you.
Yeah.
But this right here is this right here is something that you're going to have to go through. And it's not that you go through it alone, but it kind of is that you're going through it alone. Because you got to make the decisions. You have to decide what it is, how you're going to do this, how you're not going to do it. And you have to be that support person. And sometimes it's difficult being a wife because you don't want to see your husband going through certain things.
Yeah.
You want to step in and you want to, well, you know what? Well, why don't you this? It's like, no, you got to just let it be so and let him figure it out and let him get through what he needs to get through. And you be in that support mechanism to be there when all that's done.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
You know?
So it sounds like there's this element of like when you are going through that, there is this loneliness that you feel. And what you're saying is when you're going through that, like, I'm not stepping in to rescue from that because that is in fact part of your journey. And I'm just going to step in and walk with you through it rather than trying to be God and controlling or changing the situation and understanding that that's a part of what you have to go through in your development as a person.
Right.
So you can grow and get to that next phase in life, because it's still also a part of the transition that you're going through as a person. And so I guess from your perspective, Pastor Clarence, how do you, when you're going through something, just on the other end of it, like if you're going through something, how do you navigate that space knowing that your wife is kind of giving you the space to do that? Like, how do you respond to that?
I just I listen, and even though that the ball is in my court, I listen because I'm still trying to understand the whole situation. You know, a lot of times it deals with people outside of my marriage, so I have to make sure that balance is there when I'm dealing with my boys and I'm dealing with my wife. You know, and so I try to create that balance because, in my opinion, one of the things I think that's keeping families separated when you're dealing with outside relationships is the fact that we have a tendency to say negative things about people that we shouldn't. You know, say in front of our children.
Oh yeah.
You know, and so I deal with it, you know, the way that it is, which I don't always understand, but it works out because I listen to her, I listen to what she's saying, I listen to the other party, what they're saying, and at the same time, I'm always trying to keep in mind my boys because we had 3, but we lost a daughter. But I try to keep in mind that what I say is going to impact their lives for the rest of their lives. And if they also get into a situation like I did when I was young and being wild and, you know, that grace is necessary. You know, when you're dealing with people, you got to have grace, you got to have mercy. And but that's reflective in how we respond to situations in the eyes of our children. Because they're looking, and everything that we say, everything that we do, in their presence will have an impact or an effect on their lives. So I hope I answered the question.
No, you did. And I think you mentioned something that was very pivotal for not just marriage, but how you keep the necessary boundaries within your marriage. You spoke about grace. And this is what you were explaining, like just in a simple word form of like, when you go through all the ups and downs and you're giving space, what you're giving your partner is grace because you know that in this transition, they are somebody who they normally aren't. And that's affecting you in a way. And so by giving them grace, you allow them the space to go through, but also still be who you are at your best self, showing up for them. And when it comes to putting up boundaries, like you're basically saying, like, I'm not going to disrespect either party because like both of you mean something to me. But at the same time, like who God created me to be, naturally, like I want to view you from his perspective. So I need to understand how to do that.
Right.
And the only way I can do that is from a stance of grace. And so I think you might have the next question.
I wanted to ask along the lines of that is, what is the obstacle you guys have had to face in your marriage and how did you overcome that?
Ooh, that's a good one right there.
That is a good one. I think for us, I don't think there's really been
like a major obstacle.
Any obstacles for us.
That's really good. In 40 years?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But I think the only challenge has been dealing with children that don't belong to you.
Okay.
So if there was a challenge, it would be that challenge. And it's not necessarily the kids, because me and them is cool.
To that.
Okay.
Yeah. But all the stuff that kind of goes on with that. And you have to be very, very
patient.
Well, I would say you have to be very, very patient. You have to have a lot of, like he said, grace. You have to have, there's a lot of you at that point, not necessarily him, but there's a lot of you that you have to make sure that your emotions, your mind, and everything else stays pure.
Point, yeah.
Because you can become tainted very easily, right, by the other stuff. So I don't think that there's anything like between the two of us. It's just the outside, sometimes that interference. Like, and that was like a long, time ago in our relationship. But during that time, and it was probably during the time when he was dealing with most of that of trying to,
go to court,
trying to get, see his children and stuff like that, all that crazy kind of stuff like that. Yeah. I think that was the biggest dynamic. But as far as he and I don't think that we have
Yeah.
No.
And you know what? I think that time really brought us closer together.
Oh.
Yeah. So even though it wasn't a negative, but the negative part that was there,
I said challenge, more of a
it
challenge.
made it a positive.
Mm.
You know,
Okay.
because we learned to communicate. Because now, you know, we're in a situation where she's saying, okay, we got to deal with this, and this is going to be something that's going to be in a part of our lives for the rest of our lives, even though, you know, it was before she was there. But when you're active in trying to keep something or protect something, time goes by, and before you know it, just like she said, it wasn't really an obstacle. It was like something that was there in front of us that we had to deal with, and we dealt with it. And to this day, I think because it was there, it made our relationship the better.
That's good.
Okay, so to you, it wasn't an obstacle. It was just something that contributed to the growth of your relationship. And it sounds like your perspective about that really shaped how you attacked that situation.
Responded, yeah.
And so I guess just for our last question, one question I wanted to ask you is, what are some of the key lessons you've learned about marriage that you'd share with newlywed couples?
Communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Me, I would say make your own history.
Ooh, that's good.
Explain.
Because everybody has something that they want to tell you about marriage.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? You should do this, you should do that. And when two people come together, you guys have to decide what you want your marriage to be.
Mm-hmm.
You have to find out who the other person is, and that's a lifetime. That's just not something that just happens when you walk down the aisle. How do you want to navigate? How do you want to do marriage? What do you want your marriage to look like? Those are things that the two people, you guys have to decide, what kind of history do we want to make for our marriage?
Mm-hmm.
If we want it to last for 40 years, how do we want to do this? And those agreements have to be between those two people. And everybody else's interference, I don't care if it's your mama, your daddy, your sister, your brother, I'm going to tell you like this, digressing.
Mm-hmm.
When me and my husband got married, my mother told me this: do not come home and tell me anything about your marriage. Do not come home and tell me anything about your husband.
Mm.
You learn him and find out what you need to do.
Wow.
And when she said that, I was like, that's my mama.
Yeah.
How you gonna
I'm
tell
supposed
me
to come to you.
Yeah, how you gonna tell me not to come home and talk to you about my marriage, right? But what it taught me was that the issues that we have, or whatever complications, or whatever we decide, or whatever we want to do, that is between he and I.
Yeah. It's good.
And so a lot of times, even as we have, I'll say developed or grown, you have people from the outside that will look and say, oh, well, you know what? You guys just married, just like you guys kind of like, don't talk a whole lot about this and that. I'm like, because it's not something, unless you asked a question because you need to understand something, then that's fine. But to just throw stuff out there and just be like in the open, it's like, no, it's none of your business.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, they want to talk too much to other people.
Yep. I agree.
You don't need to be talking to other people about what's going on within your marriage. You need to have those conversations with your spouse. And those conversations need to be hashed out so that there's a resolution or some resolve from both parties. So I would just say you got to make your own history.
That's good.
That's good.
And so for those of you who are listening, the two key things that we can take away from this conversation is, if you want a thriving relationship, you need to understand, what do you want your history to look like, and you need to have effective communication. What vision do you have for your marriage? What do you want your marriage to look like? How do you want to define your marriage? And you need to have effective communication. Without effective communication, there are a lot of things that you won't get resolved. There's a vision that you won't be able to see through. You won't be able to navigate any changes, because with having a vision, there's going to be obstacles that you have to navigate. There's going to be things that can be meant for your good, but they won't be good if you're not able to identify what those things are and how to navigate them. And so once again, we thank both of you.
So much.
Yes,
Thank you
for the
for
invitation.
taking the time to come out here and chit chat with us and
dropping gems for sure.
we get to hear what you have to say, because ultimately we look up to both of you and we want to get to 40 years in our relationship.
Appreciate you guys.
And we want to like each other at the end.
That's
of
what
it.
I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes, thank you.
yeah. So once again, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Diving Deep with the Levs, concluding our success series. And man, we'll see you guys next week.